Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Foundation's briefing on climate change and environmental justice. I'm Christina Ciociola, Senior Vice President for Grant Making and Strategy here at the Foundation. I will take care of some housekeeping first, then we will get started. You are all on mute and we cannot see you. If you want to ask a question, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. If you're having a technical problem or want to ask staff a question, please use the chat feature. Using the Q&A feature for the questions really helps us manage the Q&A better and make sure that we don't miss anyone's questions. If you enter them in the chat, sometimes they get lost. And closed captioning is on, but if you want to turn it off, you can select the CC button on the bottom of your screen. And I want to thank my colleague, Carmen Burgos, who you will not see, but she is basically running the show and doing most of the work for today behind the Zoom curtain. So thank you, Carmen, for all your help. We have been wanting to bring the topic of climate change to our donor briefing series for quite a while. It's been one of the topics that has been requested. It's a pretty expansive topic, as I think you all know, with lots of different potential directions. I think we've put together an extraordinary panel today to at least help us get started in having this conversation, which may result, I'm sure will result and influence further topics in our donor briefing series. We know that climate change affects everyone, and under-resourced communities often bear the brunt of the worst impacts. In Connecticut, advocates and innovators are working on solutions with both local and global implications. And today we're thrilled to bring you a panel of these experts and innovators to discuss the public health risks posed by climate change and the work being done to build a cleaner future. I'm going to briefly introduce the panelists, but they each have really interesting and very impressive backgrounds. So I encourage you to learn more about them through the bios or through their LinkedIn accounts. So we are going to be joined today by Dr. Mark Mitchell. He is co-chair of the Governor's Connecticut Equity and Environmental Justice Advisory Council. Dr. Mitchell is a preventive medicine physician with an extensive public health training and background. His expertise is in environmental health and health policy. He has spent most of his career as a leader in addressing environmental health and issues of environmental justice. He has worked at all levels in his career, including with individuals, communities, as well as other physicians. We are also joined by Sharon Lewis. Ms. Lewis is Executive Director of the Connecticut Coalition for Environmental Justice. She promotes environmental justice through community advocacy and engagement. She has led many efforts to provide a place at the table for Connecticut's marginalized citizens who are most vulnerable to the harmful effects of climate change and other environmental exposures. And finally, we have Mr. Ryan Dings, joining us. He is the CEO of ClimateHaven and a venture partner at Connecticut Innovation's Climate Tech Hub Fund. ClimateHaven is an innovative hub that brings together entrepreneurs, industry leaders, corporate partners, and investors to accelerate the transformative impact of climate tech innovation that climate tech innovation can have on decarbonizing our economy. ClimateHaven is tackling climate change by investing in one startup at a time. So the plan was to start with Dr. Mitchell, but he is not, he's going to be joining us in a few minutes, hopefully. So actually, Sharon, I'm going to start with you. You've done a lot of work lifting up the voices of people who are especially vulnerable to the harmful effects of climate change. And I'm wondering if you could start by giving us some examples of some of the efforts, some of the most successful efforts you've been involved in, and some of the current efforts that activists are focused on in and around Connecticut. I know Sharon is having a Wi-Fi issue too, so we might not see her, but we will hear her.
Great, thank you so much, Christina. Yes, we've done quite a bit in the state of Connecticut since our founding in 1998, founded by Dr. Mitchell. I actually worked for him for 5 years, and then I left to go somewhere else. And when he quote unquote retired, the board looked for me to join as executive director, and I've been in that position since 2013. Okay, here I am. Great, hello.
There you are.
Um, we've done quite a bit. Our goal is to mitigate or basically abolish all of the environmental injustices that occur to folks who are in harm's way. You know, climate change disproportionately affects people of color and low-income people. And it often puts people in a position where these severe weather events, such as hurricanes, floods, and heat waves, impact them in the most negative ways. One of the problems they have is the lack of insurance and the lack of ways to resist these horrible conditions due to the pollution. People have lead poisoning and asthma, all types of respiratory diseases. If you notice the hoarseness in my voice, ever since December, I've been exposed to mold spores in my own house. And I get this hoarseness that doctors don't seem to understand where it came from. But a lot of the floods and all of the extreme weather events lead to displacement of people, changing their livelihoods, and these increased health risks further perpetuate the environmental health disparities. So what do? We make sure that people are made aware of these issues, and we work within the powers that be, such as the state legislature, to change the laws that would negatively impact people. We provide training to people. As I mentioned, we provide a seat at the table for people. It's critically important that people who are marginalized, people who are most impacted, it's critically important that they're at those decision-making tables. But it's not enough just to have people at the table. We want to make sure that they are prepared to be at that table, they're educated, and they understand what's going on at that table so that their opinions are included in all of the decisions that are made. No, I see that Dr. Mitchell has joined us, so you might want to start with him.
Thank you. Thank you, Sharon. And I'm going to take a step backwards now that Dr. Mitchell has joined us. Hi, Dr. Mitchell.
Hello.
And Dr. Mitchell is going to start by laying the groundwork for us between connecting the issue of climate change to environmental justice and give us some background. He has, I think, 3 slides that are going to help walk us through this. And I pass it off to you, Dr. Mitchell.
Thank you. So I apologize for running late. I had an appointment that I couldn't miss and went late. Environmental justice is defined by the Environmental Protection Agency as the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people in environmental decisions and laws that affect them in their lives. And by meaningful involvement, what they mean is that the people who are most affected should have a say in any kind of conditions that affect them, and that they should have a say to the point where their ideas and concerns are have a chance to influence the decisions that are being made. As Sharon said, it's because of this, because there's a direct correlation between where environmental hazards are located and the people of color and low income people. But the strength of the association is greater for the percentage of people of color than in low income folks. So if you look here at this map of Connecticut, in the blue shading is the percentage of people of color in each census tract in Connecticut. And the red dots are the EPA air pollution sources. And you'll see, as you know, Connecticut is the second most densely populated state, and people are living in each of these towns. You can see, though, that the air pollution sources are concentrated in the communities of color. Traditionally, Bridgeport has always had the most air pollution from their power plants, from their trash incinerators, and other facilities. And then New Haven had been second traditionally, and then Hartford third. But more recently, Bridgeport is still first, then Hartford is second, then Middletown, and then New Haven. So you can see that the air pollution sources are not evenly distributed across the state. They're not even evenly distributed by population. And I had been consulting with a number of environmental justice groups around the country. And every place I go, I poll the people and say, how many of you have asthma? How many people have cancer in your family? How many people know what endometriosis is? How many people, so I asked a lot of questions of different audiences that I come before. And every place I go, the people suffer disproportionately from the health effects that you would expect if they were being poisoned by the air pollution from the stacks, from the companies in their communities, from the other sources in their communities. Again, there's a direct correlation between air pollution and vulnerability. And it's not just air pollution. The state of Connecticut did a study of 11 environmentally hazardous facilities and found that 10 of them were more common in communities of color. Next slide. And this has to do with the social determinants of health. So obviously, there are people of color because of systemic racism, because of the previous laws and policies, have oftentimes have worse social determinants of health. Less access to transportation, poor housing, less access to adequate food and nutritional food, poor education, greater safety hazards, and lower income. And so these are the kinds of things that we see in environmental justice communities. When we look at climate makes each of these things worse. If you have pre-existing, let's continue, let's go back to the previous slide. Climate affects each of these, and in order to, or climate is affected by each of these, the transportation, the fossil fuels, and housing. And housing is just not, it's not just having a warm place to live. It's also, if you have poor housing, it's not only cold, but it's leaky, and you have asthma, you can get mold, and you can lead to asthma and others. So all of these things are interrelated and affect each other. And so climate makes each of these things worse. And when you address climate, you are going to have to address each of these issues, each of these social determinants of health. And while we are addressing each of these social determinants of health, we can also address the systemic racism in each of these areas. We can address environmental justice. There's an opportunity here. So again, environmental justice is all about health, and climate is also affects health. Next slide. I have created a mnemonic to remind me of how climate affects health. And I call it the heat wave mnemonic, where H stands for direct heat related illnesses, particularly for outdoor workers and for people who don't have air conditioning. E is exacerbation of pre-existing heart and lung conditions, which are more common in low-income people and people of color. A is for asthma. As you know, New Haven and Hartford both have some of the highest asthma rates in the state, if not the nation. T is for traumatic injury from things like slips and falls during floods and excessive snow and et cetera. The W stands for, and heat wave stands for water and foodborne illnesses. A for allergies, V vector-borne diseases. Allergies, the pollen season is much longer than it has been before because of the increase in carbon dioxide. And the pollen is also more allergenic than it has been because plants, when they undergo stress, will release more pollen. The V is for vector-borne diseases, such as Lyme, Zika, and other diseases carried by mosquitoes and ticks. And the E is for the emotional stress and mental health effects of all of these things, of loss, of property, of people, et cetera. So those are the kinds of things that we are concerned about. And as Sharon had mentioned, there are a number of conditions, and many of them are very common in New Haven. There are a number of environmental justice issues that I'm aware of in New Haven, and I'm sure that Sharon is also aware of many of those issues. So it's, things like the classic is English Station power plant that produced an old power plant in Fairhaven that was a major air pollution source, was eventually shut down because of the power of people in New Haven. But there's still talk every once in a while about reopening it. And it's on a very contaminated land on the island in the Mill River off of what's the main street in Fairhaven?
Grand Avenue.
Yeah, Grand Avenue, right. And then there's also a number of other facilities, the Tweed Airport. I was just talking to EPA yesterday about, I'm sorry, HHS, about them wanting to intervene in Tweed Airport, the expansion of Tweed Airport, the lead in the air from the, the piston planes still use leaded fuel. Although there is an opportunity to switch over to unleaded, it's going to be happening soon, but it's the noise and the air pollution there. There's, the water pollution. I know that people fish off of the and catch crabs off of the Grand Avenue Pier right by English Station. And they eat the crabs that are in the contaminated, contaminated land. So there there's issues with Kensington Park, and there are other parks. Many parts of the city don't have trees, and so they and so there should be an effort to add trees. Trees do a lot. They provide a lot of oxygen. They absorb a lot of carbon dioxide as well as other air pollutants. They slow down the flooding. All around Connecticut, we have a lot high rates of flooding, both from the, with climate change, we have a lot more downpours where it rains 2 inches or more in a day. And so that flooding floods not only people's homes and basements, but also contaminates the water along the shoreline. New Haven, there are 4 cities in Connecticut that have combined sewer overflows: Hartford, New Haven, Bridgeport, and Norwich. That they have one pipe that carries both the stormwater and the sewage, so that when it rains, those pipes get overflow, and when it floods, they flood sewage into people's yards, into their basements, into the streets. And so animals and children can be exposed. And so, we wonder why there's more infectious disease and diarrheal disease in the cities. And this is one reason. So, we have that flooding, and we have and then Fairhaven is in a flood zone, or very close to the flood zone. So when, we're expecting that we're going to get more and more hurricanes coming further north as, the oceans warm, and so stronger hurricanes. And so it's just a matter of time before we get hurricanes hitting New Haven. And, we had Superstorm Sandy, and we can expect more of that. And Fairhaven is one of the areas that is most vulnerable to flooding. So we need to prepare for all of this. We need to prepare the people. We need to make both physical changes and informational changes. We need to let people know what can be done. And we need, and let the people guide us. The people who are most affected can tell you what will work in their community and what won't work in their community. And oftentimes they know, they have the ideas. And so, it's really key that they be informed. With Hurricane Katrina, what do people think about when they think about Hurricane Katrina? They think it was a disaster because not because of the engineering failures, but because of the number of people who died. And the people died, many people died because they didn't know how to respond. They hadn't been part of the discussions, the practicing on how to respond. And the system was not made to protect those people who are likely to be most affected. We know who's likely to be most affected. And we know that if we give them the information, they can tell us what will work best for them. And so those are the kinds of things that we need to do. I'll stop there. I know it's supposed to be a discussion.
No, that's very helpful, Dr. Mitchell. And thank you for those specific examples, many of which are very local. Before we talk about how we prepare, the things we could do to prepare, educate ourselves, as you said, which I think Sharon could talk about, as climate change is getting worse, and it seems like the health effects of climate change and the economic effects are increasingly better understood. Are there any examples of where we've made marked improvements in some of those outcomes?
Right. Yeah, heat is one of those examples. Heat is the #1 killer, weather-related killer. And and the heat deaths have been dramatic. You know, we've had a number of years where we've had like the big Chicago heat wave in Europe and so on like that, and even, you know, in the Pacific Northwest. But because we now know better how to warn people about heat, how to manage, how to discuss heat, how to, you know, we warn people about, you know, about shelters and what they should do in heat. The death rate has declined. And again, I think that there are other opportunities where it can do that. The other thing is, and New Haven actually leads the state in bioswales. So when we had the street flooding, you know, there are things that we call nature-based solutions that we can install to reduce the effects. The main part of flooding is that it all comes at once. And if you can slow it down, slow the flood waters from going into the sewers, then they can handle it better, and it won't, you know, flood the roads and the basements and so on. And the bioswales that they put in New Haven are a really good example of the kinds of things. And we're trying to get those things done in Bridgeport. It won't work in Hartford.
That's great to hear, because the Community Foundation has actually supported some of that work and the installation of those bioswales. So,
oh, really?
yes.
Really? Okay.
So what can, switching gears to back to Sharon for a minute. Sharon, what are some of the current issues that activists or your organization are focused on?
Well, right now we're actively involved in water justice as a result of a situation that happened to me in December, where I live in a house that had a combined sewer system, and almost 5 feet of untreated stormwater and sewage ended up in my basement. So we discovered that it wasn't just me, it was several people on my street all throughout the city of Hartford. As a result of my issue, the EPA came to Connecticut 3 times, spoke to the community, made promises that they kept. The state of Connecticut, through the EPA, contributed $110 million to replace the lateral pipes in people's yards. The laterals were those pipes that go from the street to the house. Presently, it is the homeowner's responsibility to replace those laterals, and the cost can be up to $10,000 per lateral. But with this $110 million, the laterals will be replaced at no charge to the homeowners. In addition to that, there is a $5 million fund to repay folks who were not able to access funds to replace or repair what they lost. I happen to have a lot of things in my basement in boxes, and I lost everything. In addition to that, my insurance company said that I wasn't covered because I did not have sewage backup coverage. So part of our water justice campaign is to support people with resources and information on how to get whatever they need. My issue was I didn't know what to do, where to go, who to call. Now people in Hartford and hopefully New Haven, Bridgeport, and Norwich, and other places in the state will also understand who to call and where to go. It's a devastating situation where you have flooding in your home. And as I mentioned, my house is still vacant. I can't go back there because every time I do, I inhale too much of the mold and I have this hoarseness. In addition to that, we are very, very concerned about, as Dr. Mitchell mentioned, preparing people for climate change. But one thing I want to mention to you is this. My background is insurance and reinsurance. And 30 years ago, when I stepped from that arena to the EJ arena, I mentioned that we needed to stay on top of what the insurers were going to do, because climate change was going to overwhelm them. And the people who can least afford it are those who are going to be hit the hardest. Tomorrow, I'm going to be speaking in DC at the House Finance Committee, talking about this very thing. It's taken 30 years, and I'm very grateful to have this opportunity. But insurance and the lack of insurance has a serious impact on marginalized communities. And we have several communities in the state of Connecticut, especially New Haven, Bridgeport, all those coastal communities, where several of them will be feeling the pinch of no insurance, restricted insurance, or insurance rates that they cannot afford. A lot of people all throughout the United States, especially in Florida and I believe California, where insurance companies are totally pulling out of the market. So we need to be prepared in Connecticut for that reality. So that's one of the things that we're doing. Climate change is an undeniable reality, and the consequences go beyond losing your home. For those who do lose their home, especially people of color who have been historically discriminated against by the insurance companies, this is nothing new. Oftentimes, people don't even get enough to repair or to replace or to move in. We've been interviewing people and doing surveys, and most people tell us, well, I thought I had insurance, but by the time I got the check for the insurance company, I have to move into an apartment because I can't afford to build anymore. I got $300,000 and it costs $500 to build now in Bridgeport or New Haven. So people are suffering. They're not getting what they need to get. And this is one of the additional areas that we're really focused on.
Thank you, Sharon, and I'm sorry to hear about all of the personal challenges you've had with these issues too. Before we get to a couple of questions, I want to give Ryan an opportunity to talk about some of what I think is innovative work that he's involved in to address some of these issues, working with entrepreneurs and other industry leaders through his work at ClimateHaven. Hi, Ryan. Thank you for joining us. Do you have any comments you want to offer on the conversation so far before you share some of the work that you're doing at ClimateHaven?
Well, Christina, great to be with you, and good to be with everybody today. It's incredible to hear both the work that Mark and Sharon have done, to hear about the enormity of the problem. Personally, what it makes me do, it motivates me to try to solve it. All of the challenges that Sharon and Mark have outlined, all the work that they have done, that their colleagues have done in advocacy, in policy, in research, in outreach, we need to honor that work. And we need to honor that work by addressing climate change as expeditiously and as intentionally as we can. I think as we think about climate change and as we shift our mindset to more of how do we solve a problem, you can think of two fundamental things that we have to do. First, we have to address adaptation in order to really address a lot of the challenges that Sharon and Mark have outlined. And second, we need to mitigate and mitigate fast the impacts of climate so that we don't have to endure increasingly hostile environmental conditions. And so we need to address both adaptation and mitigation. And in addressing adaptation and mitigation, there's a lot of ways we can do it. It does require policy, it does require advocacy, and it also requires innovation. And this is the exciting part for me. It's where I spend my time and where I think is a really incredible place for a lot of folks to be is around this climate innovation ecosystem. Because what we are attempting to do is really undergo a massive economic transformation. If you think about it, we have spent the last 250 years as an industrial nation creating an extractive economy. And that extractive economy pulled hydrocarbons out of the ground, and it was the fuel pun intended, that drove our economic growth. But that economic growth has come at a cost, which has an incredible externality, which we don't price. And that cost, as both Sharon and Mark mentioned, is borne disproportionately by communities of color and by communities that are least able to deal with the burden of all those externalities. And so now, 250 years into this grand experiment of being an extractive economy, we have, a plan and at least a goal over the next few decades to turn that extractive economy into a regenerative one. It is a massive economic undertaking. We're talking about trillions of dollars of investment. And that investment will be made in innovations across our economy, some of which we know of today, and some of which we don't, where we still need invention and further research and development. And so this role that innovation can play is incredibly powerful, because what it does is it unlocks the opportunity for us to actually address climate change by reducing, if not eliminating, the carbon and the greenhouse gases that we are putting in the atmosphere, and allows us to adapt our environment and create better systems, better transportation systems, better housing systems, better food delivery systems, so that we can truly create the future we want and create a planet that's better for our kids than the one we found. And the tool, the really cool tool that we focus on at ClimateHaven in order to drive innovation and partake in that economic transportation is entrepreneurship. As I mentioned earlier, we don't have all the innovations and the inventions that we need today in order to complete that economic transformation. And even for the inventions and innovations we do have, they need to be dramatically scaled and commercialized. And that requires new businesses. So at ClimateHaven, we are a community of entrepreneurs and of stakeholders and investors and climate advocates who see entrepreneurship as the ultimate tool in order to take all of these innovations we do have and scale them, and in order to support the development of the innovations and inventions we don't have, and hopefully be a catalyst to their creation and their development and deployment, so that we can really unlock the opportunity to create and to make this economic transformation. ClimateHaven is based right here in New Haven, right in downtown New Haven. I'm in our space right now. We've got about 17,000 square feet of space. We house and support entrepreneurs, both with physical space, as well as a community of people, strong networks, physical resources, tools and equipment, connections to capital, all the things entrepreneurs need to build their business. And in doing so, what we hope to unlock is that kind of economic opportunity that entrepreneurship creates. If we do find the ways and the tools to invent and innovate and deploy all these technologies, well, the first thing we're going to do is, we're going to improve the environment. We're going to get at what Mark was talking about earlier, where climate makes all of those things worse. He listed all these ways. Well, we're going to attack that. By improving the environment. We're going to create jobs. Entrepreneurship, to me, is the ultimate economic development tool. It's a way in which you can build prosperity for the founding teams, for the employees, and for the communities where these companies are based. We're going to distribute wealth by bringing new entrepreneurs and new people to the table. And we can, as we think about deploying these technologies, whether it's renewable energy, whether it's clean transportation networks, whether it's decarbonizing heavy industry or agriculture or buildings, we can think about where and how we site these technologies and we integrate these technologies and address firsthand the opportunity to create an inclusive economy. And so in doing that, in improving the environment, and creating jobs, and distributing wealth, and thinking about how we deploy all this technology in a responsible manner, we could ultimately improve Connecticut. And because we're at the part of this process, really just the beginning. We're at the beginning of creating this regenerative economy. both the city of New Haven and the state of Connecticut have an opportunity to be positioned as a leader. I think it was either Mark or Sharon a little earlier talked about how, Connecticut's a very dense state. And that is an incredible opportunity, because if we here can figure out the way to decarbonize Connecticut, right, if we can do that, then we will be not only seen as a leader and attract more capital and attract talent and beat climate change, dare I say, but we will be an example for other states and other communities to follow, and that will be a very valuable position for us to be. I look at climate change and I see this opportunity to make the shift from an extractive to a regenerative economy as our modern industrial strategy. This is the way to unlock growth, to uplift neighborhoods, to build prosperity. And I think those opportunities do not come along very often. We have an opportunity to do that in a very inclusive way and honor all the work that Sharon and Mark have done and create economy and a regenerative economy that works for everyone.
Yeah.
That is what ClimateHaven is. Sorry, Mark, let me just finish real quick.
Okay.
That's what ClimateHaven is designed to do, right? Is be that place where we can build an inclusive future and deploy the technologies that are going to help get us there. We are a 501c3 nonprofit. We're so fortunate to work with the Community Foundation. I'm looking forward to engage with any of the folks on this call. You can find me very easily, and I'm sure information will be shared. But I just really appreciate the opportunity to give that overview, Christine, and forgive me, Mark, for that closing thought there. But glad to take the conversation wherever it may lead.
Thank you, Ryan. Mark, did you have a response or comment?
Yes, yeah. I apologize. I thought you were finished, Ryan. But yes, I agree with Ryan. This is a new field. This is a new challenge. We through our engineering got into this problem because of human engineering. And when I say engineering, I'm just not talking physically about engineers only, but through our innovations, and we have the ability to get out of it. But this is a new field. Climate and health is new. So there's lots of opportunities and lots of things. And the people who, again, are most affected need to be in these conversations. Historically in Connecticut, community groups have been severely underfunded, particularly environmental justice groups and groups led by people of color. It's really important that we develop community-based organizations that are led by people of color, that understand, that have lived in the community, that have the trust, that are trusted messengers, and they can faithfully relay, what low-income people are thinking, feeling, what the solutions are, so that they can tell people like Ryan, this is what we need. And Ryan can talk to his folks and say, can anybody think of a way of addressing this problem? And again, the solutions that are developed by the people who are most affected are much better solutions. They are longer lasting. And so again, I think that we need in Connecticut to support grassroots organizations, particularly those led by people of color.
Thank you, Mark. There's a couple questions I want to ask from the audience. One question, Ryan, is directed to you about ClimateHaven, asking if ClimateHaven prioritizes in any way the entrepreneurship of marginalized communities.
It's a great question. I think we want to, whoops, I'm gonna bring my lights back on. I'm trying to,
we can still see you.
I'm trying to be environmentally friendly over here. We're trying to be as efficient as we possibly can. I think it's a great question. I think we want to make a concerted effort to do two very important things. One, include entrepreneurs of all backgrounds. And that means very intentionally working with partners around the state to identify folks who want to explore a career in climate tech entrepreneurship and supporting them as best we can and making it abundantly clear that they have a home and they have a community in ClimateHaven that is here to support them. So it is a matter of identifying entrepreneurs of all backgrounds and making sure that they're interested and ready to be an entrepreneur. They know what that means in terms of climate tech, and that we're here to support them. The second equally important thing, and the question actually dovetails with something Mark mentioned, which is super, super important, is that we want the entrepreneurs to work intimately with the communities where their technology could be deployed and think about how they can thoughtfully deploy their technology to support the communities. And so what I don't want to do is be in a game of phone tag where you have advocacy groups, you have local leaders in local communities that are telling me what is important, what they need, and then me relaying the message to the entrepreneurs. I would rather be an introducer of sorts or a connector and say, these communities need to talk directly with the entrepreneurs. So that as we are thinking about, take transportation, for example, we need to make transportation multimodal, and we need to electrify our transportation network as quickly as possible. It will not only reduce greenhouse gas emissions, it will have an incredible impact on the air quality in this state, especially since we have so many people who may be simply driving through the state of Connecticut. And it is imperative that we reduce, we electrify our transportation network. Well, as we work with companies that are working on improving energy storage and battery storage for electric vehicles and other sources, that are working on EV charging infrastructure, that are working on multimodal transportation solutions to increase electric bikes that are on the road, all of these various resources that need to come together, those entrepreneurs need to be talking with the community leaders, and we need to be facilitating pilots of these technologies in a variety of communities, so that electrification doesn't mean Teslas in leafy suburbs, but it means the opportunities to deploy solar panels and EV chargers and electric bikes and encourage multimodal transportation and software solutions, so folks can get apps on their mobile devices to quickly and easily find the best solutions for them. We need to encourage all that and deploy it in these neighborhoods, so that one, we understand and the parties start to get to work together on creating that future, and two, so we make it abundantly clear as soon as possible that everybody is participating in this, that this isn't this decarbonization or energy transition or whatever you want to call it isn't reserved for a group of people over here, but this is something that everybody is a part of. And the sooner we pilot technology in all these communities, the quicker they become visual testaments to everybody that we're going to participate in this together. That's the way we win the fight against climate change.
Thank you. Thank you, Ryan. Sharon, I'm going to turn to you now for a question. There's been a couple of comments in the Q&A referencing the Connecticut Environmental Rights Amendment. And I'm wondering if you can tell us more about that amendment and maybe action that people can take around that.
Well, I'm not too familiar with that. Well, I know what it is, but I have not been involved in that fight. Unfortunately, I just can't do everything. As Dr. Mitchell mentioned, we are under-resourced, seriously under-resourced. And I almost work 24/7 just to do what I do every day now. Every day, there's always another emergency that I need to go to. For example, this insurance hearing that's tomorrow, I found out about it Saturday. There's so many things that just pop up. But to answer your question, it is to guarantee a right to clean air and clean water and a clean environment, and it's supposed to be a part of our Constitution. Well, this is my quote unquote issue with that. I'm a child of the civil rights movement. And I remember when all the civil rights gains were, I was so excited. One of my uncles said, "Not in your lifetime." Took me 50 years to realize he was so right, because I fought him every step of the way. I knew he was wrong. Laws don't change people. Sometimes laws make people push back further. So I'm not optimistic about that passing, And nor am I optimistic about people really honoring people's right to a clean environment. They're not doing it now. And I don't think a law is going to make people do it unless we educate people. I do tours and I bring people to the sites where people live. And some people are devastated. They have no idea where their trash goes when they take it to the transfer station. They have no idea that people live around these incinerators. They have no idea that as a result of government sanctioned intentional policies, that some communities are circled and surrounded by transportation hubs and highways and all of the tailpipe emissions that go along with that. They have no idea that when the traffic backs up on the highway, the trucks and all the cars come through town, through people's neighborhoods. So once we educate people, and as Maya Angelou has always said so appropriately, once people know, they do better. So we've got to make sure that a lot of people know so that they can do better.
So Sharon, Mark, did you want to say something?
Yes, I wanted to talk a little bit more about transportation and what can be, both of them mentioned it, but we really haven't focused on it. As you may know, Connecticut has the worst air pollution of any state east of the Mississippi. And that's primarily due to transportation. In my neighborhood, I live in a low-income neighborhood in Hartford. And half of the households, almost half of the households don't have automobiles. In New Haven and Hartford, more than 30% of the households don't have automobiles. But we still have some of the highest automobile air pollution disproportionately in our communities because of the highways, because of I-95, because of I-91, and because of the traffic, because people are coming from the suburbs to work in the cities at our engines of industry and business. And the economic drivers of the state or in the urban areas. So we need to I think there was a question in there about the adoption of the California standards, car standards and truck standards. We need to adopt those and to move to electric vehicles, but also focus on the pollution in urban areas most. We need to electrify our buses, electrify our trains, electrify both the school buses and the transit buses. We also need to, we talked about the electric bikes, the e-bikes, and the incentives for e-bikes, the incentives for EV, but we also need to make sure to encourage people to walk, to make the communities safer, so that people can walk and bike, and make the roads safer so people can cross the street without being scared. We don't have the 10-lane highways where you risk your life, where you have to have a car in order to cross the street. So it's really important that we address, 2/3 of our nitrogen oxides come from transportation. And again, it contributes to our high rates of asthma in the community. So we need to address asthma by addressing pollution at the same time that we address the greenhouse gases.
I want to be mindful of our time, and this is really interesting conversation. I think that could go on for a while. And I want to say, Kimberly, in the Q&A, I see you, and we will get more information on the Environmental Rights Amendment and include that in our follow-up email that goes out to everyone. But as we close out, I just want to ask each of the panelists if there was one piece of advice you'd give us all on this call on how we could advance progress in some of the things we talked about today as individual citizens. What's the advice you would give each of us? And Sharon, I'm going to start with you.
Okay, I'm often asked this question, and my response is not traditional. I want people to be outraged. That's the only way that things are going to change. You know, a very famous person once said that justice will not occur until those who are not impacted are as outraged as those who are. Benjamin Franklin. We need outrage. We need people to say, would I put up with that? For example, at this very moment, they're planning to put a huge solid waste disposal facility on the New Haven, North Haven line. And they're planning to put the incinerator in North Haven to avoid the EJ law requirements. Someone should be outraged by that sidestepping of the law. Not only that, but this incinerator is bordering Fairhaven, which is predominantly Latino now. Someone should say, why are we doing this? But everybody's silent. So we need people to speak up. If you see something, say something. In everything you do, it could be zoning, it could be planning, it could be just anything. You know, environmental justice is in everything that we do. So be outraged that it's not happening to you, but be outraged that it's happening to somebody else, a fellow human being.
Thank you, Sharon. Ryan, any advice for the group?
That's incredibly thoughtful response by Sharon, which I echo 100%. Two quick things come to mind. One, we're all on the same planet, and climate change is going to impact everyone on this call in one way or another. I think that outrage, that shared sense of understanding, that sense of education, the sense of awareness we need to do is an opportunity to come together and to communicate. I think at ClimateHaven, we want to play that role of convener of the climate community here in New Haven, as well as supporter of the entrepreneurship and innovation that's out there. And so my hope is that people have learned from this conversation, but take away the need to continue to communicate and convene around these issues, and frankly learn and dare I say develop that outrage that Sharon so eloquently stated. There are a growing number of innovative solutions every day, ones that we hopefully support too, that will help us make that transition to a regenerative economy. But while we're working on those and thinking about those, there's no better way than to kind of build our collective experience and understanding, but by coming together and being together around this issue. So I appreciate being with you all today. And Christina, thank you so much for moderating. And I hope this is the start of a conversation for a lot of folks and an opportunity to convene and come together around these issues.
Thank you, Ryan. Mark, last pieces of advice?
Yes, I know that we're a bit out of time. I would say that, again, I agree with both what Ryan and Sharon said. Just want to suggest that we listen to the communities, that we talk to the communities, that we provide information to people that they can use and engage them. I think the government sees the importance of setting priorities based on community desires. And I think all of us need to see that, and we need to support the communities in order to be able to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you all. And I want a special shout out to Melissa and Kimberly in the chat for the additional information and sources and links that you've been putting in there for us. Thank you all for joining us. Please don't forget to complete the evaluation, which will pop up at the end of the webinar. It's very valuable to us, and we use that information to inform our future briefings. You will also get a follow-up email, which will include a recording of the webinar and other useful links and information. So again, thank you all and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.